Program Director, Mr. Tim Modise. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me, as I acknowledge you all, to acknowledge those that I have asked to be provided with a list of as preferred people for acknowledgement. The President of SAIGA, Mr. Philip Rakwale, the SAIGA CEO, Mr. Russell Morena, and the former CEO, Ms. Macy Nkau, the former honorary council members, Mr. James van Heerden, His Excellency Ambassador Chantal Apoloyo of Congo, the Dean of African Ambassadors, His Excellency Andre Anza Panyeka, His Excellency the Ambassador of South Africa to the Central African Republic, Boniswa Ramalebana, His Excellency the Ambassador of Burundi to South Africa, Alexis Buruku, His Excellency Victor Rasekala, His Excellency the Deputy President of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. Allow me also to acknowledge those that I came with, my dear wife, Mapefo, and the team of people that I pray with on a daily basis, Apostle Linda Gobodo, Apostle Mpho Muswewu and his dear wife, Pastor Ruth Muswewu, Apostle Patrick Mogoeng, Pastor Zulu, Sibonakaliso Zulu and his dear wife, Happy, Sister Tsehofatso Motaung, and last but not least, Dr. Ntabise Muleko. Whatever I'm going to say is of relevance to any of us, regardless of our areas of responsibility, regardless of our professions. It applies with equal force to all of us because my understanding of the theme is essentially about doing whatever you can to rise up to the standard demanded of you for the greater good of the entire citizenry. That's what it is about. So it doesn't matter whether you're a business person, whether you're a domestic worker, whatever your calling may be, the demand on you and I is to do whatever we do with special focus on how what you do can impact positively on society and redound to the greater good of us all. So the fact that I'm invited by SAIGA and I'll be mentioning them as a team of particular professionals should not be misunderstood to mean this is a SAIGA-specific message. And however irrelevant what I say might appear to be, just pay close attention, it's going to connect in the end. I want to begin by thanking the leadership of this great organization for having invited me. Many don't know, I received so many invitations here and abroad, and I just never accept an invitation because it comes through. I pray about it. It may not make sense to you, but it does to me. Because I know if I accept it on my own, I'm just going to bore you until you fall asleep. It will not have an impact. So I'm grateful to the leadership for having invited me. I am grateful for the warmth. This thing doesn't seem to be friendly to short people, man. I think it's fine now. I think it's fine. One of the nations that have gone through particularly trying times, untold pain and misery, while seeking to take advantage of a constitutional process designed to help them identify those they could pin their hopes on and give a mandate to for the realization of their otherwise deferred aspirations is Kenya. So soaked in human blood was the electoral process of a particular year that both President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto were forced to make an appearance at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. I recall that when I went there on an official visit to attend a conference, the president of that court and a few top leaders of the court asked to have an engagement with me. And because of the great hit that was generated by the trial or the intended trial of these two African leaders, they couldn't help but raise the issue regarding the future of the International Court of Criminal Justice, Criminal Court, with me, and soliciting views regarding what could be done to harmonize the relationship between the court and the African continent. You would recall that our country was particularly concerned about the operations of the courts. There were all manner of arguments regarding those deemed to be eligible for appearance before the courts, etc., etc. All manner of resolutions were passed. And that was because an electoral process, a process designed to help the citizens identify those who could truly step up to the mark for the greater good of the citizenry, turned out to be something other than what they could have imagined. The possibility of a grave constitutional crisis and of another bloodbath loomed large in the aftermath of a subsequent election. Happily, they chose to bring the matter to court. The Supreme Court of Kenya, under the leadership of my dear friend David Maraga, ruled in a manner that they considered appropriate under the circumstances. They were vilified at every level. They were threatened. Another time, I was Chief Justice of this country, and I also happened to be the president of the Conference of Constitutional Jurisdictions of Africa. When threats came from even the supreme office in that nation, I felt constrained to intervene and display judicial solidarity. I prepared and issued a statement which was circulated in Kenya and across the continent, and I must say it was well received. Subsequently, I was invited by my colleague, David Maraga, to come and address the judiciary of Kenya. I must say it took quite a bit of hesitation because I ultimately caged in because I didn't know how the powers that be would greet my visit in view of my reaction, my response to what was being done to my colleagues at the time. Now, as you would know, there has been elections recently. Again, there was contestation, disagreement about an electoral process. Happily, the judiciary of Kenya have developed to the point where politicians and the citizens seem to have developed confidence in it. I say so, though I'll touch on it, I hope, finally, because of the history of that judiciary. Remember, there was a stage when the entire country had lost confidence in the judiciary of Kenya. there was a strong belief that they were corrupt. In fact, when their previous Chief Justice, the one before Chief Justice Maraga, came to deliver a speech at Wits, he confessed that corruption was so rampant in the judiciary, and that is why the entire judiciary had to be interviewed all over again, so that those that were considered rotten or that the process would single out as rotten could be discarded, and only those with integrity could remain. And this is the judiciary that was able to save the country from the impending constitutional crisis. There is a new Chief Justice, Her Ladyship Martha Koome, and she did not hesitate, together with her colleagues, to deliver the kind of justice that the country deserves. Now, how gratifying that the judiciary of Kenya has again delivered what the nation expected it to deliver, for peace and stability to be restored to that nation. Why was I able to intervene in the manner that I did? Which could answer the question, why is it that many people in government and in the private sector are not able to do the right thing? Why is it? Maybe I should be direct. In case there is a tendency to think that business is always clean and government is the only corrupt one. Where does the toxicity in our rivers and the ocean come from? Who is producing those toxic materials? Who is dumping them where they are being dumped? I went to deliver some a speech at a business gathering. Were they not angry? When I was raising a concern about a place just outside of Johannesburg, where not only human beings were crippled and blinded, but even goats and sheep, because there is a heap of material that was dumped there, and those responsible reportedly say it's too expensive to remove this danger from society. Were they not angry? Nobody even escorted me out of the hall. But the bottom line is this: corruption is not a sector-specific thing. No, corruption is a human weakness. It doesn't matter whether you are in government or in the private sector. If you are rotten from the beginning, your rottenness will follow you wherever you are. Whether you are a pastor or a traditional leader, you will steal and perform fake miracles wherever you go, because it's in your nature. You can become a captain of industry, you will still be rotten even there, corrupting the politicians because it's in your nature. So let us discard this myth that cleanliness is to be found. That cleanliness is to be found in the private sector and corruption is in government. Who is corrupting them? Why are those that come out of government either as director generals from treasury taken into the private sector if everybody is corrupt in government? It's a human problem. Now, I don't even know whether I should read my speech. Anyway, let me try and read, and maybe I'll round up without reading. It is not in every nation that, as in Kenya, circumstances or authorities permit that justice be done regardless of how powerful or wealthy some of the personalities involved in litigation might be. For example, when I visited the European Court of Human Rights a few years ago at their invitation, I was approached by a judge from one of the European countries She told me that in her country, it was very difficult to find a judge who is untainted by corruption, and sought my counsel regarding what could be done to create an environment that frowns upon corruption and untouchability, or this injustice that wears a judicial gap masquerading as justice. In other words, she was in search for a judicial environment that incentivizes and smiles with admiration at the delivery of true justice and fidelity to the judicial oath of office. Needless to say, I shared my experience-based reflections with her. As a former Judge President of the High Court, the former Chief Justice of the Republic, the former President of the Conference of Constitutional Jurisdictions of Africa, and a one-time chairperson of the World Conference of Constitutional Jurisdictions, and based on engagements with judges from many jurisdictions, I'm satisfied that the possibility to enforce accountability or step up to the mark of one's high calling requires much more than meets the eye. It requires an enabling constitutional and policy framework, a truly ethical and servant leadership to give substance to the regulatory framework and allow subordinates to comply with prescripts free of indecent interference, and a dedicated and similarly ethical cohort of functionaries committed to follow their selfless and visionary leaders and managers. Constitutions, laws, and policies are not self-fulfilling, and no constitutional dispensation is worth the paper it is written on if it is not truly designed to ease the expeditious resolution of key and burning national challenges, obviously within reason and aided by a sensible and efficient deployment of available resources. That said, the possibility to address those key national challenges assumes the absence of well-resourced and merciless system designed to undermine a truly just and enabling constitutional and policy framework, and the noble efforts of ethical and caring leaders who just want to get on with the business of advancing the best interests of all our people. I pause here to say, has any of us ever wondered why the war in DRC Congo is not coming to an end? Why are the people always fighting? Where do they get these guns from? And who stands to benefit from what is going on there? Is somebody doing business in DRC Congo? Who are they? Is there a risk that if peace and stability were to be restored, business would not flourish as before? Do we ever pause and reflect on why is it that Africa is not developing in the manner expected, notwithstanding our intellectual prowess, notwithstanding our education from wherever everybody else have been educated? With so many resources, such fertile soil and rivers that could allow us to produce enough food for the rest of the world? What's going on here? Is it because we are inherently corrupt and incompetent? Where can we trace the wealth of Africa to? I had a very interesting engagement when my colleague, the former Prime Minister of France, invited me, because he's now the President of the Constitutional Council of France. He arranged that I meet the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in that country. And what he sought to know from me was, what is it that could be done to alleviate the plight of African people who are crossing, the oceans at great risk with mediocre boats, many dying. I said, you see, African people are just trying to follow their wealth where it ended up. Because where the wealth went is where greener pastures are. So we don't have to fight one another. War is, who's going to win? But a very vigorous intellectual engagement, very honest, is called for. This thing of kowtowing to other people because it is dangerous to tell the truth. You'll be called controversial. You'll be depicted as a madman. You will always be misrepresented. Your successes will be played down to make you look like a failure, even if you are not. Who are you trying to please? Just to appear on media, on cameras, and be praised? Flattered, actually, not be praised. When are we going to settle down and say, we have fought, and it hasn't quite rewarded us as much as we thought it should? How about creating a multiplicity of think tanks to very honestly and frankly engage on matters that affect humanity, particularly in this continent? We can't have this continent so well endowed with wealth, and yet people are dying of poverty. People are dying of sickness and disease. The continent is a beggar continent. People can hardly ever agree on anything that would be of good to them. I say it, Your Excellencies, with a great sense of humility. When I was president of the Conference of Constitutional Jurisdictions of Africa, something unprecedented happened. I was invited to attend the meeting of the heads of states and heads of government at the African Union. My goodness. My goodness. I was devastated by what I saw. I was devastated by what I saw. I won't go into details, but I asked one of the two former presidents that I was seated with, I said, is this the quality of leadership that even you people were dishing out to the continent while you were in office? They said, no, things have changed. Well, leaders fail because we citizens fail them. We become sycophants who are looking for tenders. We praise whoever is in office so that we can be invited to state dinners. The ethical leadership that everybody can speak confidently and clearly about, it's just a speech. It's just on paper. But in practice, it's not there. Wow. Why did so many people die in the continent in pursuit for this that we are not touching? Are we not betraying them by seeking to protect our lives? When so many are dying, is it enough that my stomach is always full to the point where it's as big as it is when other people are dying of hunger? Where is my conscience? I would rather be rubbished every day of my life. I would rather be pursued in whatever way people consider necessary than shut up about the plight of people who are suffering out there. By the way, just in case you believe the falsehood that I'm running for president in 2024, it's a lie. Because you may say, now he has started this campaign. You will hear from me if I'm running. You won't have somebody holding my hand and saying, blah, blah, blah. You'll hear from me. Even a councillor will announce his candidacy or his candidature. You can't have somebody announce it for him. But here is the point. What is the point of these meetings? When next we meet, do you take stock of what you said the previous year and what has since been achieved? Or is it just a nice intellectual exercise? Big English, big theories, come back, nothing has changed? I never want to be part of such meetings. I want progress. Because the state of our nation, the state of the continent, the state of the whole world is such that a truly radical paradigm shift is called for, and belief in the power of one. Think about Mother Teresa, what difference she was able to make. Martin Luther King, even Steve Biko. Think of individuals who chose to be different. Professor Sam Peter Blanche, who bears no dear. Think of anybody who chose to be different no matter the consequences. I was going to even read the Constitution. Let me just wrap up. And before I do, let me say this. I've truly prepared a nice speech, believe you me, but I'm not flowing with reading. Ordinarily, I realize that time does not permit. I'm the kind who come, address the meeting and say to people, even the media, ask me any question that you have, even if you think it's embarrassing. Because I never really have anything to hide. And I'm not the kind that ducks and dives and people must whisk me away so that I escape questions that I believe to be tough. There can't be any tough question if you are sure you are a man or a woman of integrity and the truth is what you pursue. When I was Chief Justice, I would have a meeting. We called it the Judicial Accountability Session. Members of Parliament, members of the public would be there, and I would say, here we are. We are your servants. Put questions to us. Any question. We'll answer it here, even in the presence of the media. And I would say to the media afterwards, we're going to have a session with you. I will not leave until you've run out of questions. And even those that would have been writing all manner of things on the side, all those that would have been saying all manner of things on the side, they would leave with clear answers, with an inability to pursue any agenda that is false. That's how it should be. We should account for what we say. We should account for what we do. We must be driven by our convictions. I've been privileged to be a judge. You see, privileged because our Constitution is structured in such a way as to allow a judge or a magistrate who has never embraced corruption in their life as professionals to be true to their oath of office or their affirmation. If you don't do the right thing, it's only because you've been corrupt all along. I cite an example of one lawyer. I don't remember whether it was my wife or I, having a chat with someone. They said, no, so and so is a criminal lawyer. I said, what do you mean? This man does civil cases. No, that man is a lawyer, but he's a criminal. Now imagine, and I won't say whether that man ended up being a judge or not. I won't say. Maybe he ended up being, maybe he didn't. I don't want to be sued. Imagine if such a person ends up being a judge. A person who is known to be dishonest. What is going to change? Becoming a judge or a magistrate does not automatically sanitize you or detoxify you of who you really are. You know, my brother here was talking about character. You carry yourself, the real you, into the bench, into business, into government. But I found myself in an environment that allowed me to appreciate what an honor and what a privilege it was to become a judge. And happily, I was attacked at the time of becoming a constitutional court judge. I thought it was enough. It was worse when I became Chief Justice. Little did I know that it was actually a good thing because it helped me not to depend on the praises of people. They praise you today, tomorrow they rubbish you. Never allow people with motives to make you, because they will destroy you. If they make you, they will unmake you. Never allow yourself to be in a position where you mold yourself in a manner that will ensure that you enjoy positive coverage. I'm not saying be reckless. No, just be yourself. Be principled. Don't shift away from your principles because it will not earn you publicity. Stand for what is right, even if the whole world may choose corruption as an option. Don't allow yourself to be so consumed by the desire for influence, the desire for power, the desire for, in fact, the love for power, because you can kill. The love for money, because you can kill. The love for influence and fame. Your fame is not going to feed hungry people. Pursue what matters. You know, my home language is Setswana, and one of the expressions is moto ke moto. You are nothing if the plight of other people means nothing to you. If all you pursue is wealth and power so that you can move around, you know, with your shoulders up high. Tell us how much your clothes are worth. For what? How much your watch is. For what? Just one time. As I round up, let me say, Section 1D of the Constitution lays down the very foundation that informs the responsibility of internal auditors to hold public office bearers and other people in government accountable for their use of resources. It talks about accountability. Maybe I must read this part, if anything else. More pointedly, Section 1D of the Constitution lays down. Now, let me go earlier. You know, reading is not my thing, but bear with me. Let us now give a more heightened attention to aspects of our constitutional framework relevant to the theme, step up to the mark and put citizens first. In appreciation of where we come from as a nation, the founding fathers and mothers of our constitutional democracy put fundamentals in place for an accountable, responsive, and transparent state machinery. As a result, the cornerstone of our constitutional architecture informs the obligation that rests on all state functionaries, including internal auditors, to, in effect, hold those entrusted with public power and public resources to account for the exercise of that power and for the use of those resources. More pointedly, Section 1D of the Constitution lays down the foundational values of our democratic state as, among others, universal adult suffrage, a national common voters' roll, regular elections, and a multi-party system of democratic government to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness. The founding values of our democracy find reinforcement and more explicit elaboration from Section 195 of the Constitution, which in relevant parts provide as follows. Basic values and principles governing public administration. Public administration must be governed by the democratic values and principles enshrined in the Constitution, including the following principles. A high standard of professional ethics must be promoted and maintained. Efficient, economic, and effective use of resources must be promoted. Public administration must be development-oriented. Services must be provided impartially, fairly, equitably, and without bias. People's needs must be responded to. Public administration must be accountable. Transparency must be fostered by providing the public with timely, accessible, and accurate information. Good human resource management and career development practices to maximize human potential must be cultivated. Public administration must be broadly representative of the South African people, with employment and personnel management practices based on ability, objectivity, fairness, and the need to redress the imbalances of the past to achieve broad representation. The above principles apply to administration in every level of government, organs of state and public enterprises, close quote. And Section 237 of the Constitution demands that, open quotes, all constitutional obligations must be performed diligently and without delay, close quote. The appointment of and services rendered by all state functionaries, including employees of public enterprises, and for the purpose of this meeting, internal auditors, are therefore expected to be characterized by, for the sake of emphasis, I highlight, those principles and values that are of equal application to both the public sector and the private sector that interacts with the public sector. A high standard of professional ethics, efficient and economic use of resources, a developmental approach, impartial, fair, equitable, and unbiased delivery of services, responsiveness to the needs of people, commitment to accountability, transparency enabled by timely provision or accessibility of accurate information, the need to free and maximize the potential of all. A drive towards broad representation without sacrificing competence and fairness, and a diligent and speedy or excellent performance of constitutional obligations. The possibility that all internal auditors have to discharge their obligations in keeping with this high professional standard or mark to which they are always expected to step up is predicated on the assumption that the critical prerequisite exists both at the level of policy and related prescripts and at the level of ethical leadership that is unwavering in its commitment to the enforcement of compliance with the regulatory framework. For life can only truly be breathed into the values of accountability, responsiveness, and openness or transparency if certain conditionalities are met and a decisive break is made from particular externalities. For instance, if the constitutional process envisaged by Section 1D, through which constitutional office bearers are elected, is not itself compromised or corrupted. After all, it is these constitutional office bearers who bear the main responsibility to create an environment that would free internal auditors to step up to the mark and put citizens first. Additionally, the possibility of internal auditors to step up to the mark assumes an unwavering commitment by key players in their line function to the advancement of the best interest of the public and to good governance. Accountability and transparency, like true leadership and effective management, do in this context all start at the commanding heights of the public and corporate sector. As long as it is virtually impossible to ascend to the commanding heights of government without the guiding or enabling hand of business, it is an absolute necessity that not only government is corruption-free and truly accountable, but that business is similarly held to account and detoxified of corruption. After all, corruption, as I said earlier, corruption and manipulation is not a sector-specific problem. It is a human problem that cuts across all sectors. Only if a funding mechanism may be found that frees future government leaders of a quiet but effective influence or control by business, may real and rigorous accountability be primarily and urgently demanded of the state. It bears repetition that if the initiating or supporting hand, the fuel that propels these constitutional office bearers to positions of great influence or raw power, are not demonstrably accountable or held to the same standard as those that they fund, then there would be a serious problem. This is so because whenever they disapprove of blind and ethical enforcement of accountability and strict observance of transparency as it applies to some, then beneficiaries of their investment or funding in quotes, hitherto held out as sheer philanthropy driven by an unwavering commitment to human rights and democracy, would be told or would readily know that their benefactors and their allies ought to enjoy a status of untouchability, while all others are to be held duly accountable. And selective accountability, especially one that leaves those who will draw power untouchable, is just as bad as no accountability at all or corruption. Let me pause here to explain myself. I've had somebody buy me lunch and subsequently demanding a favor. I said, what's so special about your food? You think I don't have food, so you can give me some food and then demand things from me? Truly, there is no free lunch. What if people give you millions to make sure that you get to a particular position? I'm not saying that everybody who gives is necessarily corrupt, but Americans have done a thorough study, and maybe I must confine it to other countries, a thorough study regarding the patterns with regard to policy development by the big two main parties there. And they have traced every legislation, every policy of the one in power to those who fund it. Because people work hard for their money. Why should they give it to you? Once given, they don't have to remind you over and over again of what they have done for you. You know what they have done for you. When they come and say, oh, we see that at long last the potholes are going to be done away with, there are these huge contracts. You know, I love roadworks. I love this kind of work. You know what they mean. I don't like this law. It needs to be changed. I don't like this policy. You know the message that is being communicated to you. They have oiled your hand. They have enabled you to reach the heights that you could not have dreamt of. And maybe you were not even aspiring to become what you ultimately became. Had it not been for them saying to you, you know, you are the one, you wouldn't be where you are. I say this because since 2019, I was approached by really rich people through their proxies. Mogoeng, resign and run for office. I said, no, you know me now. I don't do anything without asking my God. When people were rubbishing me, seeing me as a mad lay preacher, I depended only on him. So I'm not going to drop him now and please you people because you are talking president. I'm not a man who is ambitious. I pursue a vision. I get there, abandoning my principles, I'll be the exact same person as the ones you say are wrong. Why do they want to give me money? Even this year, you have no idea how many people have made me offers. Mogoeng, let's prepare for 2024. Money is not a problem. We have so and so. We have billionaires so and so on our side. 3 billionaires. Hey, I said, sir, you say you are a Christian. He said, yeah, let's go and pray. Don't call me. When God has spoken to me, you'll hear from me. Don't tell me what God told you. You must speak to me. Once I take that money quietly, I don't have to be told what happened. So if anybody wants to give me money, I'll go public. I'll come here and say, so-and-so has given me so much. So that people can correlate my actions to the funders. They must know who gave me money and check whether I'm seeking to please that person or not. It can't be any different with those that are being funded by people out there. They identify you carefully so that you can advance a cause. And they dump you as soon as they realize that you're not working as hard as they thought you would. So let me go back to my speech and finalize. Similarly, an internal auditor cannot step up to the mark in an environment where unethical sycophants are predictably and routinely elevated to senior positions to ensure seamless compliance with orders from those enablers or kingmakers in the Section 1D constitutional process who happen to be unethical. Some of them I believe are ethical, but my focus is on those who happen to be unethical, issued through their proteges in government. This is in effect what Professor Noam Chomsky referred to as regulatory capture. Where then are we in this nation? Are all functionaries in both the public and the private sector willing and free to step up to the mark? If they are, how then did the seemingly large-scale and virtually institutionalized impunity or untouchability and corruption come about? How did the apparent dereliction of duty, even in respect of obvious and key obligations to citizens, find its way in both sectors? If that healthy and conducive environment doesn't exist, why is it so, and what remedial action is required to create the ideal environment? Is the reason for the inability to hold all accountable and ensure responsiveness and transparency confined to your place of employment, or government as a whole, or to a particular sphere such as the local government, or to the private sector, or is it a consequence of a much wider problem? Whatever the case may be, why has the problem worsened over the past 28 years? And how then can it, if at all, be addressed effectively and definitively? I go back to Kenya and say, there was hopelessness in Kenya because those entrusted with the responsibility to ensure that justice is administered whenever cases come before them were captured. They were corrupt. And I don't think that corruption is location specific. The fact that colleagues in Kenya were corrupt, the fact that some time ago, as Chief Justice, the late Chief Justice Pius Langa related the story to me, he was invited to a country seeking to offer some guidance regarding how best they could perform their functions. They said to him, "Sir, why are you asking us about these things of telling us about ethics, about performance? Why don't you ask us why we are corrupt as judges?" He said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we are corrupt. We are corrupt because we are underpaid. We are corrupt because we are neglected. And until all that needs to be in place for us to do or to step up to the mark for the greater good of the entire citizenry is in place, we will continue to be corrupt." I had an engagement some years back with one Chief Justice from our continent. And we happened to be talking about salaries. He said, "As Chief Justice, I earn 2,000 American dollars per month." I said, "That's ridiculous." He said, "Yes, that's why there is corruption in my country." I said, "What about other judges?" He said, "Forget about them." What am I saying? One, it's important, I believe you have all the answers, but let me round up by saying it is absolutely necessary that at least we get the regulatory framework right. Let's get the Constitution right, because what they did in Kenya was to truly equalize the judiciary in terms of benefits and authority with the other arms of the state, and ensure that even after retirement, they are well looked after. I must say, we are well looked after in this country, even after retirement. They gave them the kind of independence that I believe is unsurpassed in this continent, and probably even in the whole world. Until professionals in the public sector are allowed to enjoy that kind of professional independence. Independence in the sense that you are allowed to do exactly what the law and the prescripts say you must do. Until we have that in place, there will be a problem. But I believe you have that in place. The next critical step is the leader that you have above you. Because law is not self-fulfilling, as I said. It may be there, just like the Constitution. Who is enforcing it? Is he or she allowed to enforce it? Or is there a possibility that there may even be authorities beyond our shores that tell you what to do and what not to do? I was disturbed doing a case some years back to learn that chicken is being dumped from America in our country. I said, but we have our own chicken. We need to see farmers flourishing in this country. Why should we be forced to eat chicken from America? They said there's surplus there. I said, but their surplus should be their problem. So it appears, and I put it no higher, that it may not always be possible for a supposedly sovereign state to do every right thing it wants to do. It may not be. It may not always be possible for even the entire continent to do what is obviously in the best interests of the citizens of the continent. I think you and I, from our position of privilege, have a responsibility to look for the answers, to make a quality decision, to be counted, even if it is among the few who would do the right thing no matter the consequences. I was privileged in 2018 to be asked by the United Nations in Geneva to go and address a meeting there And I picked up a coat because they were celebrating Mandela Day on what then former President Nelson Mandela referred to as economic justice or trade justice, and made it the thrust of my speech, considering the wealth that we command in terms of minerals and soil as a continent. Yeah, were people not angry? But happily, about 50 ambassadors from Africa and other nations, other nations in the Americas, came to me. They were cute. I was so embarrassed. My wife was there. They said, why should we wait for 60 years to hear this message again? And I knew what they were talking about, but people were angry. I was invited to China. And one of the things that happened was a meeting was facilitated by my colleague with members of the Politburo. And I thanked them for their win-win policy. But I sounded a warning. My colleagues couldn't believe it. You could almost hear a pin drop. I said, I love your win-win policy. I've had some engagements with people about it. But be warned. If your win-win is not real win-win, it's a disguised way of wanting to take advantage of us while we are sleeping, there will come a time when a new cohort of leadership arises, and you'll regret the day on which you took advantage of us. I'm not accusing them of anything, but everybody be warned. Hunger and desperation has a tendency to generate things that are unthinkable. May we go look for solutions and be committed truly from the heart to the well-being of people who suffer. I don't know about you, but I don't care whether people praise me or condemn me. It doesn't matter. I know I come from abject poverty. I never had a chance to become Chief Justice. It is an honor that I want to exploit for the greater good of the people. I will seize every opportunity that comes my way to make a contribution that would help those that are hopeless, whether white or black. It doesn't matter. I speak straight to white people. I speak straight to black people. I socialize with farmers, but they know. I'll always tell them the truth. I won't betray them. So let's do our bit. Step up to the mark for the greater good of the citizens. Sorry for taking too long, when you are not reading all the time.